Hi guys, welcome to another battle report. This one, 2,400 points of Legions of Chaos against 2,400 points of Ogres. In this game there was no comp, but both sides are quite reasonable, roughly ETC. End times troops were usable, but the end times rules weren't applied. So the deployment phase then, starting on my side, closest to us are the Blight Kings, and then the Beasts of Nurgle, unit of Plague Bearers, and then the Demon Prince with Chaos Armour and Scaly Skin, so a 2+ armour save there. Then a unit of Furies, then a unit of Plague Bearers, that one's got the BSB in it, then another unit of Furies, and then the drones, and then closest to the wall is the Skull Cannon. On my opponent's side, closest to us are the Mournfang, then a unit of Noblars, 5 Iron Guts with the Butcher, who's a level 2 wizard on the Law of Moor. On the other side of the building is a unit of 8 Iron Guts with a Slaughter Master, who is level 4 Death, who has forgone spell 6 for the signature spell, which I think is a mistake. An Iron Blaster, unit of Noblars, and the Man-Eaters closest to the wall. The building is an arcane ruin, so lots of channeling there. Now, this is Vanguard, and I must apologise to my opponent at this point, as I've discovered since this game that Plague Drones don't actually have the Vanguard rule. They do hover, and they are cavalry, but they don't have the flying cavalry special rule, so they don't actually Vanguard. Although they do skirmish, and they weren't used as skirmishers in this game, so apologies there. You may notice the Blight Kings on the far left flank here, and I have said that I would rectify that in the future, but I was quite concerned about those Mournfang, so I'm hoping to catch them on the flank. My rough plan is to do a sort of pincer movement with the Blight Kings and the Beasts on one side and the drones and the cannon on the other. Obviously the drones are trying to take out that Iron Blaster before it can pop off a cannonball shot on my Demon Prince. Which is why for now the Prince is behind a wall, because if a cannonball does come his way it destroys the wall but doesn't harm him. So it would turn out that I would go first. So the Prince has moved with the building providing cover against the cannonball, and then the Blight Kings and the Beasts prevent the Mournfang from closing the door on him. So it's quite a long charge anyway, shouldn't really be a big thing. The Furies have moved into the middle so that they can be more useful later on. The drones are of course advancing on that Iron Blaster down the flank, and they are out of the view of the Man-Eaters, which is useful. And the Plague Bearers and the cannon just simply advance towards the battle. So this is the end of my turn, not a lot happening really. Curse of the Leper has been cast on the Blight Kings in case my opponent goes for a long charge. They're now toughness 7. Blades of Putrefaction also cast on the Plague Bearers. I'm hoping to get the Nurgle Law attribute working for me, which would give my Demon Prince +1 wound and +1 toughness, but it didn't happen. The cannon misfired when shooting at the Iron Blaster and rolled a 4, and my opponent failed a spectacular 8 channel attempts. So yeah, that was the end of turn 1 for me. So this is my opponent's movement phase, and you can see that what he's done is actually try and sort of head towards the drones with pretty much his entire army. I asked him about this afterwards, and he said that he was particularly concerned about the Blight Kings and the Beasts and the Demon Prince, which makes a certain amount of sense. But I wasn't sure about this, as I pointed out to him at the time that this would allow me to outmaneuver him and would mean that I would be able to charge him in turn 3, and that there'd be nothing that he could do about that, but he seemed satisfied with that anyway. So this is the end of my opponent's turn 1. He's cast Spirit Leech on my drones, which I dispelled. He cast the Caress of Lenif against the drones as well, but that did nothing. Obviously they're very high toughness. He also cast the Stubborn spell on the Man-Eaters. I forget what it's called, Toothcracker maybe. And then he targeted my drones with shooting. Now he made a little bit of a mistake here, because he targeted them with the Man-Eaters before targeting them with the cannon. If he'd have done it the other way round, a cannonball could have potentially gone through the front rank and then the drone on the back. But what he actually did was target them with the Man-Eaters pistols first. Killed one, and then that meant that the cannonball could only take out one. As it would turn out, that wouldn't matter, because the Iron Blaster would misfire anyway and roll a 6. So first blood to my opponent, 1 Plague Drone down. So this is the end of my movement phase. You can see the beasts closest to us have charged a unit of Noblars, hoping to run into the side of the Mournfang there, but that wasn't to be. They failed their charge. And the Plague Bearers in between the Demon Prince and the Furies and Cannon charge the other unit of Noblars, who also failed the charge. The drones have charged the Iron Blaster, and that means that the Demon Prince can move into the middle of the board, using the building as cover against the Mournfang, but otherwise free to engage later on tactically. The Blight Kings are trying to get through the forest, just trying to get into the game really, but they're really going to struggle, and the Furies have simply moved into position for use later on, with the cannon advancing on the far side. So at the end of my turn, not a very good turn really. I cast Plague Wind, that was dispelled, and then I tried to cast Blades of Putrefaction, and that failed to cast, even though I put quite a few dice into it. The Reign of Chaos table, which we remembered for turn 2, forgot it in turn 1, gave us Rot, Glorious Rot, which killed 5 Noblars and a Man-Eater, so actually the Gods of Chaos have done more damage to my opponent than I have at this point. The Iron Blaster fled, it was beaten by 4 points and failed its leadership test twice. Obviously it was in the locality of the BSB there, but that wouldn't be enough to save it. So my opponent's movement phase, you can see the Noblars closest to us continuing to flee. The Mournfang have moved in between the Arcane Ruins and the building. Behind the Arcane Ruins is the smaller unit of Iron Guts with the level 2 wizard. Of course, the Plague Drones aren't actually there because they've pursued off the board, but that's where they'll come on later, so we've left them there as a point of reference. The bigger unit of Iron Guts and the Man-Eaters on the other side there with the Noblars in front of them. And it seems that what my opponent is trying to do at this point is to sort of overload one side of the board, and to sort of even things up that way. So, end of my opponent's turn. He has had a very successful magic phase with only 8 dice. I only had 4. He used the magic item that Ogres have. I forget what it's called, but it gives them +2 levels. So his Death Wizard is effectively a level 6. He's cast Spirit Leech on my cannon, which I failed to dispel. It's taken only 1 wound though, due to the dice rolls and a ward save. He's also cast the Stubborn and Toughness spells from the Law of Moor on his Mournfang in the middle there. And then the Man-Eaters have inflicted another 2 wounds on the cannon. So obviously at this point in the game, my opponent is prioritising the Skull Cannon as his target before he moves forward with the rest of his plan. So into my movement turn, I've not actually declared any charges here. What I'm trying to do is set things up for later on. I've got those Furies in the middle, and my plan is to force my opponent to charge the first set and then have him overrun into the second set so that the Plague Bearers and the Beasts and possibly the Demon Prince can double team them. The drones have come back on the back there, and the Blight Kings closest to us have charged the Noblars because they've got to do something, so and the Noblars would flee and they would fail their charge. Now actually I've screwed myself over here, because if you're a more astute player you might realise that the Noblars further at the back there can charge the Furies that I've got as my second line, and that will allow the Mournfang to charge the first unit and then overrun. And if he does his combats in the right order, the Mournfang will get to fight the first unit of Furies and then the second unit of Furies. Elsewhere, the Plague Bearers and the Cannon are advancing into the game, trying to get involved. So, end of my turn. I've cast Curse of the Leper on the Bearers furthest away from us, but that was dispelled. And then I cast Fleshy Abundance on that unit as well, which did manage to pull out my opponent's Dispel Scroll, so something there. And my opponent dispelled a large Plague Wind. The Cannon has killed an Iron Gut, and then he managed to go into the Slaughtermaster, who failed his Lookout Sir save. But he would only take 1 wound off the Slaughtermaster, so the cannonball stopped there. So that was the end of another fairly disappointing turn. So the end of my opponent's movement phase. The Mournfang have charged those Furies immediately in front of them. The Noblars have charged the Furies behind them. And the Iron Guts have pulled off a fairly long charge, needed a 9 and got it on 2d6 charge against the Plague Bearers. So my opponent's taking on the odds, but he has pulled it off, so fair play to him. Elsewhere on the board, the Gnoblars on the left, furthest left there, continue to flee, and the smaller Iron Gut unit and the Man-Eaters are both moving up to support. The Man-Eaters, you can see, are heading towards the Skull Cannon. Now this is the end of my opponent's turn, and he's made a bit of a mistake here, because what he's done is he's done the combat with the Mournfang first, hoping to overrun the Mournfang into the combat that involves the Gnoblars, but that's actually a mistake, because with the Gnoblars maximising against the Furies, what that actually means is they stick out just a little bit more, and when the Mournfang will overrun, they will actually come into contact with the Gnoblars before hitting the Furies, and so they'll stop 1 inch away. So instead, what my opponent's actually done is he's wiped out the Furies and then decided to reform. Now the Gnoblars have ripped through the Furies and overran, but those Mournfang are now in a precarious position, because obviously the Demon Prince and the Beasts are both there lurking ready for them. Magic wasn't particularly good for my opponent in this turn. He failed to cast the big version of Toothcracker, and that ended his magic phase pretty much, because the death spells obviously can't be used in combat. 2 saves were made against the Man-Eaters, who were using their pistols on the cannon, 1 by the cannon's armour save and 1 by its ward save. The Ogres managed to roll 4 1s on their Strength 6 Ogre charge. So there they are, those are the offending dice. That would mean that the Plague Bearers only lost combat by 1 point, and of course they're unstable rather than demonic instability, as this is a Legions of Chaos list, and so now they're holding those Ogres. Just a moment ago I said that the death spells couldn't be used in combat. Of course what I meant there was that the selection of death spells that my opponent had weren't lending themselves to combat, as they were direct damage and missiles and so on. So into my movement phase, and you can see that actually I've been playing a bit of a waiting game here. This movement phase is really what I've been working towards for the last couple of turns. The Demon Prince, who of course has the Always Strikes First sword as a lesser gift, and the Beasts and the Drones have all charged those Mournfang. Mournfang are particularly nasty, but that is going to be very unpleasant for them. The cannon has charged the Iron Guts and will of course use the Gore Feast rule and get some impact hits and then hopefully regain some of its wounds. Closer to us, the Blight Kings have charged the Gnoblars, who have fled, and of course then they've failed their charge, and the Plague Bearers have charged the Gnoblars in the middle of the board. So this is the turn that will make or break the game, really. So end of my turn. I've cast Blades of Putrefaction on the Beast, so they're poisoning on a 5, and although my opponent managed to dispel both Fleshy Abundance and Curse of the Leper, those Mournfang were just not able to cope with the combined weight of the Beasts and the Demon Prince, who's got the Always Strikes First sword, and the Drones. So that was the end of them. The Iron Guts up against the Cannon and the Plague Bearers actually managed to fail 2 leadership tests, even though my opponent had the Crown of Command. He rolled 12 and an 11, and so the Cannon was able to pursue there. Obviously the Plague Bearers did quite well because they've got that 4+ Locust save from the Herald. And the Gnoblars were beaten in combat and fled, but the Plague Bearers turned around in case they might be useful later on, but as it would turn out, they wouldn't be. So my opponent's turn. I think the back of his army has really been broken now, but he's not giving up without a fight, so fair play to him. The Iron Guts with the level 2 Wizard have charged the cannon on the flank there, and as it would turn out, the Man-Eaters would be on the flank of the Plague Bearers as well, so that's going to get particularly ugly for both my cannon and my Plague Bearers. On the left side of the board, those Gnoblars there have rallied, but on the right side of the board, those Gnoblars continue to flee. So my opponent may be beaten, but he's not going down without a fight. He played this very well. The unit of Iron Guts that had charged the the Skull Cannon went first, crushed the Skull Cannon, and then overran into the Plague Bearers, which would mean that they would have a second round of combat as they would fight the Plague Bearers at the same time as the Man-Eaters. And you can see there the damage that has been done to the Plague Bearers. Unstable meant that a large number of wounds were taken, but the unit did have a couple of Plague Bearers left. The Herald is there, and I think the Champion, maybe the Standard, can't see from here. So yeah, quite a shot back, really. Fair play to my opponent, it's done well there. Oh, also should mention, my Herald did manage to cause 2 wounds on the Butcher. He issued a challenge which the Butcher accepted, but he's got the Fencer's blades as a greater gift, so the Butcher was only hitting him on 6s due to his Nurgle special rule as well. So well done, Herald of Nurgle. So my following turn, you can see everything is piled into those Iron Guts and the Man-Eaters. The drones have charged the Noblars to cause them to flee towards the board edge, and the Blight Kings on the left have finally managed to get into combat, only against a unit of Noblars, but that's the way it went for them, I'm afraid, today. So end of my turn, you can see the beasts have managed to take out those Man-Eaters. I did cast blades on the beasts and fleshy abundance as well, although the Man-Eaters had flaming attacks. They had the banner of eternal flame, but all those poisons on a 5+ would mean that the Man-Eaters would break from combat and be caught by the beasts. And the Herald of Nurgle managed to kill the Butcher, who was by now down to 1 wound. The Iron Guts actually did a spectacular job here, and although they were beaten quite heavily in combat, my opponent rolled a double 1 for his leadership, so the Iron Guts fight on against the Plague Bearers and the Demon Prince, and the Herald of Nurgle is still locked in combat with them as well. So my opponent's movement phase, not a lot to report really. On the left side of the board, just mentioned at the end of combat, obviously the Blight Kings took out those Noblars. On the right side, the Noblars continue to flee, and the Iron Guts are still locked in combat in the middle, so not a lot going on in the movement phase for turn 5. So end of the turn, the Demon Prince has taken 5 wounds off the Iron Gut unit. 2 wounds were taken by the Herald, and the unit did the final wound on the Standard. And then the Champion, you can see there, broke from combat, but actually managed to outrun the pursuing Demon Prince. So that was the end of my opponent's turn 5. And then here at the end of my movement phase, the Demon Prince charged the fleeing Ogre, who rolled very low on his flee roll and was caught and killed. And I left the Noblars alone because, well, the game had ended by now. A few things sort of stand out for me in this game. I was surprised how well the Man-Eaters did, and their pistol attacks really are underrated because they caused me quite a lot of trouble. I think this game showed how important it is to do your combats and your shooting in the right order. You know, if my opponent would have dealt with the second unit of Furies before the first, then those Mournfang could have possibly overran into my Plague Bearers, which would have changed the game entirely. That was around about turn 4. I think this game also showed the importance of patience and positioning. You know, I spent 2 or 3 turns getting into the right position, but as a result of that, I was able to make the charges on my own terms that would win me the game. And I think that's an important lesson for anyone that's trying to learn their way through Warhammer, you know, is to have that patience. Anyway, that's another battle report. I promise I will post one where I lose at some point. I just haven't lost for a while. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.